Okay, everybody, welcome to the Jimmy Jim James Show. We've been off a little bit, and I'm getting ready to get in vacation mode. So this is my last podcast for a couple of weeks, but I'll be reaching out during my journeys out there in Europe, crazy places. Um, Today's podcast is just a feeling that I've been having. Like, I think the world is just so sensitive right now. And I've always said that if people are picking apart minuscule things that don't mean anything, that they're really like in a lot of pain because of the
Right.
fact, like, if you have things going on in your life and your life is the way you want it to be, there's no need to be picking apart um, anything that's minuscule. You know what I mean? So, this, I think we've just got our culture is all about labeling now, which I think is the worst thing that we could ever do in a million years. Um, it's kind of the beginning of racism and all of that kind of stuff. Started with labeling, and we're still labeling. And the LGBTQ plus, it keeps adding up. Um, and I just think that everybody is just super sensitive about everything. This cancel culture. Some things needed to happen, I think, in the culture, but I think it's just gotten to be too much. And it's like, we just need to, I was watching the Kevin Hart special too, and that made me really think about that as well. It's like nobody is perfect. We are
Right.
not perfect human beings.
Right.
We're going to make mistakes. We're going to say something that's offensive and that, you know, not everybody's going to like. And that doesn't mean we just cancel somebody, or we
Agree.
just, you know, I think it's great with social media because there's more power in voices, but at the same time, doing detrimental things, and I think that's great.
No, I agree. I mean, going back to like the Kevin Hart special, he talked a lot about like something that he tweeted like 8 years ago that he got black backlash for when he was getting ready to host the Oscars. And it's like, yeah, he said it, but he wasn't going to apologize for something that he meant when he said it. You know what I mean? And I feel like today, our culture, we're so sensitive and we're so in our feelings, and it's like trendy to cancel people for their opinion.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of times their opinion, especially right now when it comes to like the labeling and using the right pronouns and all that stuff, it's not about people being offensive. It's just like this is their opinion on it. And I feel like their opinions are being invalid because society is so sensitive. They're
Yeah.
they're they're whining about it. I
Well,
mean,
and like what he says in his special, which was so powerful to me, is that people change. Look, I'm not the same person I was when I was 18 years old. I
right,
was raised in a household with, um, family members, and my mother, she didn't know she was a racist because we had, black friends. So then she didn't ever discriminate that way. But when she would talk about people, she would use the wrong language.
right,
And so I grew up that way. And when you know better, you change and you do better, right?
right,
Someone brings it to your attention, and that's what happened to him. Like, he grew up. He probably said those things at that young age, not even knowing really what it was all about. The world was in a different place. We didn't have the knowledge that we do now. It's not as accepted as it is today, although
right,
it's kind of going all kinds of places now. But uh, but at the same time, like, he grew. So, like, you're going back 20 years and bringing out something that the guy said and acting like it's relative today. It's
right,
not. It'd be different if he was still that same person, but he
right.
clearly is not. He clearly talked about the whole situation. Um, but again, you know, the Academy wanted an apology, and he wasn't ready to give it. And I think that he realized he should have said more than what he said. I think my initial response would be the same thing too. Look, I've grown, but not everybody. Like, one of his employees said, not, nobody knows you like we know you.
Right.
Like the public doesn't know who you are today. So they're seeing that and thinking you're still the same person. And unless you come out and tell them that you're not the same person and explain why you're not the same person, it's not going to go away. And it didn't go away. And I felt bad because, he obviously moved on and his career's been fine. But, I think as a kid, when you have hopes and dreams, right? I think that he's going to be the fifth actor that had hosted the Oscars.
Right.
That's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a milestone. And so I think I feel bad for him in that respect. But man,
No,
what a great
agreed.
documentary.
Right. And also, there's such a fine line nowadays between, you know, people being sensitive and then people being like discriminatory. And I
Right.
feel like that fine line sometimes is overlooked in a way. And
Right.
when it came to the Kevin Hart story, and he was talking about, like I said this a long time ago, and like you said, I've changed and this is not the person I am, but I also am not against what I said back then. And I stand by what I said back then because I meant it when I said it. And
Right.
sometimes I feel like people they take offense to things that they don't see the eye to eye with.
Right.
And unfortunately that's kind of like the world we're living in right now.
Well, and what he said is not. It's almost like Uh, I always say the truth will set you free, but the truth will also hurt you sometimes because
Right.
people don't want to hear the truth. They
Right.
don't. They don't want to hear the truth.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, the way Kevin Hart was raised, the community where he lived, in that era, when I don't know, was it 10 years ago? A father of a child, of course, is not going to want. I think that it was brought up a little bit. Is not going to want their child to grow up being, you know, in any kind of 1% of the population, right? No matter
Right.
whether it's gay, no matter whether it's you're disabled, no matter whether it's you're blind, you're deaf, you're whatever it is, you're going to want the best journey for your child,
Right.
right? That you could possibly have, because why would you want them to go through all that pain? Because it's painful to be different, right? You're always teased, you're ridiculed, that's never going to go away. Hopefully, it's going to get better and better and better as time goes on. But there's always going to be that component. There's always going to be that insecure kid that's insecure from maybe genetically or his home environment, and he's attacking other people to make himself feel better. That's
Right.
what we do at that age. So that's always going to happen. But so that's where he was coming from. He was just coming from a place like, well, if I have a boy, I don't want him to. If he goes to put on a dress, I don't want him to do that. Because
Right.
no, it's just like a mother. I'm sure the mother has a little girl. She's loving having that girl, right?
Right.
Then all of a sudden, girl becomes a boy. There has to be some sort of, you know, you're not excited for it. You're like, well, shit. Now, what are we gonna do? Oh,
Right.
you go through emotions. There's nothing wrong with that. Like it's natural. But we look again. We're in this labeling society where you have to put yourself. Everything you say or do, you got to put it in a box. You got to
Right.
label it. You got to write a label on it.
Right.
You know.
There was a story that was circling around TikTok this week about a teacher. He wore makeup to school, and he's like an elementary school teacher and very flamboyant, great, I'm pretty sure an amazing teacher, but 16 out of the 20 kids in his class were taken out of his class. Like the parents took them out of their class because they
Mm.
thought this is not what we want for our kids. And he, went on social media and was like, this is wrong and all that stuff. But I mean, as a parent, I feel like I would have did the same. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I will tell you. So I have family that live in Europe and have lived in Europe their whole lives and been raised there. And I always used to wonder why, like the men in Europe, you can't really like if that guy, the guy from Europe was in the United States, people would think he was gay just by his mannerisms and by the way they carry themselves.
Right.
So I think the Europeans have been raised very open-mindedly. You know how you can go like to new beaches, no problem, all that. But they've been raised very openly. And so what I see is like the younger kids in Europe, they're just exposed to everything. They do, they dress the way they want to dress, and there's no. I mean, I'm over my nephew's house, and it's like he's got a sparkly Disney shirt on, and da, da, da. No parent here in the United States will ever allow their son to. You know what I mean? It's like so. I think it's all how we perceive everything and how we raise our kids here in the United States is totally different than in other countries, and so they're less like I could see if that teacher was wearing makeup in Europe, I don't think the same thing would happen. I don't think
Right.
anything would happen. I think that maybe there might be, if we've got 50 people that are complaining, there probably would be one or two
Right.
over there, just because they live so much more of an openly freer, loving, non-judgmental lives than we do here. I don't know why, they just do, and their culture is they're just so much warmer and open, and I think it could be because there's so many different, the countries are like states there, so many different nationalities, and you're colliding with them all the time, and so they they just grow up that people are different, and they look
Right.
different, and they talk different languages, and that's just the norm, right? Here, we all speak the same language. We all, look the same. If you're in that nationality or if you're white, if you're black, if you're Asian, if you whatever, So it's like we label and compartmentalize, and then what that does is it ostracizes people
Yeah, and it
because they
divides
got
it.
of that label. It divides us. Exactly right. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you really think? So if the teacher wears makeup, what do you really think that's going to change your boy from all of a sudden he's going to start wearing makeup, but he's straight? I mean, it's like it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
No, that's a great way to look at it. I feel like the division and the labels they're taught, they're not something that we naturally
Totally,
know. I mean, like as a
totally.
kid, I wasn't someone that knew race until someone taught me race or taught me the
Right,
difference. Like I was telling you yesterday, my stepmom was from Indonesia. I used to tell people I was Asian because that's
right,
that's what I was around. And like
right,
not understanding and not seeing the difference between myself and someone else until it was taught to me. And like that is something that we are teaching people, and I feel like that's what's causing the divide, and that's going to continue to cause the divide of this person's different from you because of X, Y, and Z, or this person is different from you because they label themselves as this. You know what I mean?
right, right. All right. Yeah, like I said, when I go, well, I'm going to be there in a few weeks actually, and I'll be there, and it's like, I just remember how I grew up, which was so the boy wears boys' clothes, the boy, da 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 da, blah 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 blah. And I see them when they raise their kids, and the boy comes out in a tutu and his sister's leotard, and he's laughing and joking, and he loves costumes, but he's got a costume collection of everything, cowboys and this and that, and he just always just wear. I think he does it because I say he's going to be an actor, like he loves the attention, he does all those things but they allow it and not say a word. Like I said, like sometimes he's wearing things. I'm like, oh my god, I think to myself, when I was a boy, I could never wear something like that because back then your parents thought that if you know, played with girls' shoes or you put on a girl's piece of clothing, that was going to change you into being gay. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where in Europe, they just don't give a shit. Like you do what you do, and the kid ends up how they're going to end up, and that's it. And there's no divide. You don't feel it there at all. You don't talk about it. It's crazy.
No, I
It
agree.
really
I
is.
feel I feel like it's definitely a difference with the culture out here and how divided the United States is just as a whole, and how we're teaching our kids to be divided.
Yeah. And we're getting let's change the story a little bit, but we're getting so divisive, and we're getting so like bothered about the stupidest little things
Yeah.
that are minuscule. And then we have situations like I was telling you about this airline thing, like
Mhm.
this whole thing about, like I see it on Daily Mail sometimes, like, I was ashamed because I was sitting in my chair and da 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 da. Well, if you're buying a damn seat in a chair, you better fit in that chair. That doesn't mean you get to sit in that chair and the chair next to you because that person's
Right.
paid for their chair. So and and then these wheelchairs, like I mean, it's gotten to the point where, and I watch to see like who's really handicapped, truly handicapped, and who is not. Right?
Right.
Like they can get all the way to the ramp, but then they don't want to walk down the ramp. Well, why don't they? Because they get the first seat, you know, or it ends up to be, someone that should be in two seats and they need time to get in. That's cool, whatever. But I just think the airlines. I think I don't know if I told the story before, but I was flying home from Maui. I had switched my seat, which I will never do because I believe everything happens for a reason. And I was in that seat and I changed it because this married couple wanted to sit by each other because they couldn't last for 5 hours without sitting by each other. So I switched my seat and I get sat next to this lady who's got this service dog. Like everybody has a service dog. And I believe like if you need a service dog, then you should be flying. Just stay home. Like, just stay the hell home. Just get the service dog that's sitting on her lap. She starts to drink. She has about 5 or 6 cocktails. She passes out. She's feeding the dog treats, and the dog literally is bouncing the worst gas the entire flight home. And guess what? She was passed out.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm sick and tired of these people on planes and the FAA backing this bullshit. I mean, like you bought a seat, that means you got to fit in that seat. So
Right.
I was telling you that like one time I was like literally crunched over like this, and the plane is right here, and I'm like all the way home. So my back killed me afterwards because I couldn't even put my elbow down on the armrest
Right.
because the person's stomach was hanging over the entire thing and down the other side. I just think it's ridiculous. I don't understand why you cannot tell somebody you have to buy a second seat. I don't get it. Maybe they need to have a set of seats on the plane that are for larger people to make them feel, because I'm sure it doesn't make them feel comfortable sitting in that tight little seat,
Right.
right? Like maybe they make them buy a first class seat, a wider seat they can fit in. Um, So it's like I just think we have so many, you know, bitching and moaning about little things, and then we have obvious things like this seat issue. Nobody does anything about because they don't want to touch it. It's
Right.
like
And then they
a
don't want to
taboo
hurt
topic,
anybody's they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. That's what it is. They
right?
don't be like, "Hey, it looks like you're over our weight capacity or our size capacity. You have to buy another seat." And then it's offensive and then
They
the
do it to
company
our
gets
luggage. They
I
do it
know,
to our
but like
luggage.
then the company gets sued. Southwest will get sued or whatever because you were discriminatory based on my weight.
Well, no, but what they should say is the seat is just like they do your luggage, right? They're only going to take a certain size suitcase and a certain poundage suitcase. Well, if it's good for my suitcase, it better be good for your ass because they can say that the seat is 24 inches wide, da 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 da. That's what the seat is. You got to fit in that seat. If you go over
Right.
that seat, you have to buy a seat. If you're wider than that, you got to get into this seat here. You got to get an extra seat. Why can't they do the same thing? I don't get it. Right? They
No,
do it
I
with my
agree.
luggage because I'm
I
always a heavy
agree.
carrier luggage. And then you go to Europe, they have the European carry-on size, which is smaller, which I had to buy because I was on EasyJet. I had to pay a $900 bill. $450 of it was mine, and I they don't their carry-on luggage is even smaller than ours. So, and I don't know what they do. In Europe, that people are 95, 98% are slim. You don't see heavy set
Right.
people in Europe because they walk a lot and they're light eaters and all those kinds of
They don't eat
things.
all
So
the
they
junk
just,
that we eat, all the
yeah, they
processed
don't
food.
have all the junk food. You're right. You're
Hmm.
right. Like I was saying, like I go to my aunt's place and they literally have bread delivered to the house every day because it goes bad. There's no preservatives in it. But when you eat it, you don't. I don't. I have like can't have complex carbs. I really bloat up fast and feel gross. And I don't over there.
Right,
I
because
don't. I
it's
put
not
on weight because
processed.
the food's so damn good, but and I want to eat all the pate and all the good fattening stuff. But all of that stuff is fresh
Right.
daily. The cheese delivered fresh, no preservatives and things. That's why I think that that's why I think their refrigerators are so small because they don't do like we do.
They
Like
don't store all the foods like we do. Instead, everything's
no,
fresh.
no. That's why I have a huge refrigerator and a huge freezer.
See, now you have to do a podcast about your travels when we come back.
Yes, for sure. I'm going to give you play by play. While hopefully I am um, going to have lots of videos of the fun times and beautiful places and all of those kinds of things. But
Yes.
I definitely think that we've got to. I don't know what the answer is really to get people to start thinking not about such the minutia, you know. And I think it gets bigger picture is that there's so many people miserable out there with their
Right.
lives that that's the only thing that I mean. You basically don't talk about anybody or tear somebody down or give an information horse if you've got a wonderful life. You don't need to, right? Because what you're trying to do psychologically is tear someone else down and make yourself feel better. So that's a whole other. I don't see that going away. There's too many people in the population, especially downtimes like we're having now. We're just going to have more and more of it.
I
You
agree.
know, I mean, I'm cognizant of it. I kind of watch every word I say doing the podcast. Even it's like a delayed reaction in my head because if I just went off on a tangent, I don't want to offend somebody. So or use the wrong word or label. Stop the labeling. If you get one gift from this podcast, if you could do me one favor, the listeners out there listening, every time you go to label somebody, try not to. Don't call somebody. I was guilty of it. You know, I have a black friend, and I'd be like, trying to describe like, da 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 da, but he's big and tall, and like a big loud voice, and I could use other attributes, but I would just, I didn't think about it. It just was like, I have a lot of friends too, so I'm like, what, haven't you met my friend Lavelle? The big, tall, black guy, really funny voice, really laughing voice, all boisterous. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. And then after the was it Me Too movement, whatever movement was, I really started thinking about that. Like, why do I? It's just natural. It wasn't like I was labeling anybody. It was just natural. But I don't say, oh, my white friend. You know what I
Right.
mean? I probably would say, if I had an Asian friend, I probably would. But so I stop myself now. I stop myself from doing it just because I clearly, he's never been offended or anything like that. But I just clearly don't want to offend anybody. But you have to work at it. You have to work at it. Because we've been taught to label everybody and be taught
Exactly.
that everything is different than who we are,
Yeah.
right? No matter if I'm looking at another white guy, it's like different because of they're heavier or they're shorter or they're, we are always labeling. So just think about that every time you hear yourself putting a label on something. Stop yourself. I always say like I can feel it in my body when if I'm working on something like that. You can feel it start. You can feel it coming up, and you got to stop yourself.
Yep.
You know,
Like word
crazy how the
vomit.
body just physiologically you get so much of that. I went to therapy one time, and it was and actually hopefully I'm gonna have her on here. Been in therapy my whole life, but maybe not for the last 7 years. She was my last therapist, and literally I wouldn't say cured me, but pretty much cured me of everything. And in the most simplistic way, but taught me how like so if you bring up feelings in your head, like what are you feeling in your body? Like, do you feel it
Right.
in your chest? Do you feel it in your stomach as you're talking about this? Do you feel it here? Do you feel and it was really super powerful. But she's a great therapist. And I'll say her name because hopefully she's going to come on. Because her practices are so simple. Like she breaks down everything so simply that you feel yourself stupid for whatever things are going through your head. You feel so you're like, hey, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel like I'm not enough? Why do I feel like this way? Why do I feel that way? And then she'll just break it down for you, and then you're like, oh my God, I feel so stupid, but relieved at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. So, anyway, do you have anything else to add, Gabby?
No, I think this was a good one, James. I think we nailed it on the head.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'd like to talk more about it, but just kind of came natural.